It'll vary a little bit somewhat from school to school. So I would say the first part of the process from a parent's perspective should be to look at the websites of the schools that you might be considering or that you are considering. The websites usually have a page of tuition and financial aid information page that gives a good overview of what process they have that's specific to that school. Many of the steps will be the same amongst all the schools, and much of the timing will be in the same relative time frame, but there can be some differences that are important. So if you're on one school's website and you see, that the application deadline might be February 1st or January 15th, you shouldn't assume that that will be true for all the other schools. You might be on one school's website where they might say, here are the 2 or 3 documents that we require. They may or may not be the same as other schools. So my first tip would be when you're asking a question about the process, make sure that you know from each individual school that you're looking into what their individual process are. There's not one process that fits every school exactly the same. Now, having said that, there are usually like 2 or 3 steps that are part of a typical school's financial aid process. Number one is most schools will use some sort of application form. It's either something that they've created themselves or they've partnered with a third-party vendor or supplier that actually gathers all the financial information. So the schools will let you know what application form to fill out. You may run across schools that will use firms or outside companies. I know some of the more common ones are one called Clarity, one called SSS, School and Student Services, one's called TADS, one's called Private School Aid Services. There are a few that are out there, but instead, not all schools use the same one. So each school will tell you which application form and company you should start with. When you do those forms, most of them will have a fee, so be prepared to perhaps pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 to $50 or $60, depending on the firm that's doing the processing. They will usually mostly offer only an online service, so you go online to complete their application, pay the fee. Some of them will have fee waivers if your income meets certain criteria, certain thresholds that they determine or that the schools might determine. But be prepared to pay a fee. The application form itself will ask for a bunch of information about your income, your family's size, your household, a lot about your expenses, anything that you own, checking accounts, home, investments, savings, etc. And it'll ask about your debts. The really big idea around the application form itself is just to get a snapshot of your family's financial situation at the time you're doing the application. And we can talk a little bit more about that. I know there's some separate questions about that. But when you complete the application, most schools will also ask you to submit copies of your tax forms. And they usually will ask for the most recently completed tax year forms that you have, and perhaps the most current, the tax forms for the current year. And so some schools, being that we're in 2023 right now, so many schools will ask you to submit your tax forms for 2023 as soon as they are available. And some schools will also ask you to submit your 2022 tax forms, especially if your 2023 are not available at the time you need to submit them or at the time you need to hit the deadlines. And so don't be surprised if schools ask you for your 2023 and or your 2022 tax forms to go along with the application that you fill out. One of the primary reason for why schools ask for the tax forms in addition to your application is just to have corroborating documentation to back up the information that's on your financial aid application. So for the most part, those are the things that schools will ask for. It's really just those 2 things for the most part for the typical family. Submit the application, submit your tax forms in the manner that that's asked of you. Mostly Most often that'll be like sort of like uploading electronic copies of that to the financial aid service provider that you're using.